location, location, location. Now think of Israel. Think of its position in the ancient world. It's not a good place actually to be living. God might have given them a promised land, but there was nothing mentioned about stability or security or safety or serenity or anything that begins with an S, I suppose. It's a dangerous position to be in. They are smack in the center. They're the hinge of the three great continents, the known continents of the time: Africa, Europe, Asia. So when the great empires, for example, are coming on a north-south axis from Mesopotamia to Egypt, Egypt to Mesopotamia, guess who's smack in the middle? Israel. And when the axis of empire shifts from north-south rather, to east-west, when it's, for example, the Macedonian Greeks of Alexander against the Persians, who's smack in the middle still? And if it's the Romans against the Parthians, Israel is smack in the middle still. It's a dangerous place to live. So what kind of a theology do people who live in a place like that develop? They're going to be invaded, by the way, no matter what they do. And it's a bad theology to tell them that invasion is a punishment for their sins. No wonder the Bible is filled with people crying out for mercy. They're going to be invaded. If they spend their lives on their knees praying, they'll be invaded. In fact, it's a crime against humanity and divinity to tell them you'll be punished if you sin by invasion. Invasion is their destiny in that position. You can see this most clearly. You can see it all in a nutshell in Daniel chapter 7. There's a great vision that Daniel has in that chapter. On the one hand, he sees the great empires, the mighty empires they know, and they're not really like human beings. The empires and their imperial rulers, they're like beasts coming out of the chaotic waves of the sea. They're like a lion, they're like a bear, they're like a leopard. That takes care of the Babylonian Empire, the Median Empire, and the Persian Empire. They're not even human. They're chaotic, feral beasts. And when it comes to the Macedonian Empire, the great empire of Alexander the Great, the text stutters all it can say is, they're different. It says it 3 times. No beast is adequate to it. The phalanxes, the mighty phalanxes of Alexander the Great are so frightening with their 20-foot pikes. Imagine a 20-foot pike. You're holding it 5 feet from the end, and 15 feet are into the killing zone. 5 ranks in the killing zone. It's different is all they can say. So on the one side are all of these great empires. So think of empire. What's the alternative for Daniel 7? It's called the kingdom of God. So over against the kingdoms of earth and their ferocious bestiality, actually, is this truly human kingdom of God. Now, we're not told an awful lot about it. We are told there is an alternative. It doesn't come from the chaos of the sea, it comes from the order of heaven. But it's coming down to earth. It's not about a kingdom up there somewhere. It's about a kingdom from up there to come down to the earth. And it's going to be the opposite to all the kingdoms that they have ever known. It is the clash between empire and eschaton. Eschaton. So how do you hold that faith and that experience together without giving up on either? Eschaton, which simply means there has to be an end to this mess. God has to put an end to this mess of God's world. My own translation for eschaton or eschatology or the kingdom of God or any other term for it is the great divine cleanup of the earth. And if you say, well, how do they know this? They would say, well, it has to be. How can a just God maintain an unjust world? There has to be a cleanup. That's eschatology. It's an act of faith in the alternative to the brutality of war and violence and oppression. Now, think of all those images you see. Think of the empires. Think of the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the Persians we talked about, or the mighty empire of Alexander. Empires are not getting nicer, kinder, gentler. They're getting more powerful. So the problem is getting worse. When you look at Alexander, and they thought that was the worst thing they could ever imagine, the ferocious phalanxes of Alexander with the heavy infantry like the hammer and the heavy cavalry, the anvil, backwards and forwards, are those 20-foot pikes. And then they got the Romans. It really is not that they're more brutal, it's simply they're much more efficient at what they do with their war and violence. So there's a sort of a pressure. When is this eschaton going to happen? When is this kingdom of God going to appear? If not now, why? If not now, when? Empires are getting stronger. Where is this alternative vision coming? So we bring in another word, apocalypse. Apocalyptic eschatology means in the first century, if I am, let me say, apocalyptic eschatologist, I have a revelation. I'm claiming and telling you I have a special revelation about the great divine cleanup of the world. That's my claim. So apocalypse could mean any sort of a revelation in itself, but in the pressure cooker of the first century, with the Roman Empire taking over the world, as it were, apocalyptic eschatology meant I have a revelation about the great divine cleanup. And if you say, well, what's your revelation? It could be anything, on the one hand, but what your audience wanted to know is when. If you told them, oh, in 1,000 years God's going to clean up the world, you would be an ex-apocalyptic eschatologist by evening. Nobody cared. What they wanted to know, and be convinced by your arguments and by your revelation, it's going to happen now. It's going to happen in our lifetime. So in the first century, the Roman Empire had arrived in about, say, the 60s before the time of Jesus. It was certainly here to stay. The difference between Alexander's mighty empire was that it swept across the world from the Macedonian plains to the Hindu Kush, and then it kind of came apart when he died. The Romans kept what Rome got. Rome always went in one direction. It seldom, maybe on the fringes here and there, but it seldom went backward. So the Roman Empire was here to stay. And where was God? Where was all this beautiful talk about eschatological kingdoms of God and a beautiful earth and no violence, no war, no oppression, no injustice? How could you believe that stuff? So an apocalyptic eschatologist had some way to persuade people that despite all the evidence in the way to the contrary, despite the overweening power of Rome, far greater than Alexander, despite all of that, now, within our own very lifetime, any day now, God was going to clean up the world. And they weren't big on descriptions of how. It was like, it's going to happen, God will overcome someday in our lifetime, and if you said how, it would be like a lightning flash of divine intervention. Could we do anything about it? Could we do anything about it? Well, we could pray for it, we could hope for it, we could believe in it. We couldn't really do it. This was going to be God's own divine intervention. God would do it all by God's own self. Just wait for it any day now.